This is Josh Rees, and you're listening to the Mile High Church podcast. Kudos to you for focusing on your spiritual growth. Speaking of spiritual growth, have you had your moment of awe today? Dr. Keltner wrote a great book called Awe, and it's all about how awe can heal us, uplift us, and keep us dialed in. He's going to be at Mile High Church on November 1st talking about it. You can join us in person. You can join us online. It's going to be fantastic. Check out milehighchurch.org.
Topic today, being free. This is part 2. Let's talk just a moment about part 1. Last week, the idea was put forth that in many ways there's a tendency to give our power away, our power and our possibilities away to circumstances and people, thus essentially agreeing to become their prisoner and feeling captivated by and in them. However, the truth of the matter is that our spiritual birthright is freedom. And that being free is the deep calling and the greatest potential of our being. And so to emancipate this free essence within us, what we first have to do is actualize the free spirit in us while we're in the midst of what we had deemed to be the limitation or that which has confined us. In the midst of. And then we can begin to follow the heart's purpose and brave a higher path forward in our life now. It starts always now. Lifting up, freeing that spirit now. So today, this is an opportunity to continue to expand our sense of what it means to be free, truly, in its essence. In the Bible, it says, let your yes be yes, and your no be no. Calling us to say what we mean and mean what we say, especially when agreeing or disagreeing, not wishy-washy. So let's deal with the no side of that equation first. This is embracing our capacity to say no, especially when no may be our most positive answer. To say no to that which we're tempted to drag along as the old and the stagnant, fearing to turn a new chapter, perhaps. To say no to that which in our life is no longer appropriate. Maybe behaviors or something such as that. To say no to anything trying to enter our life that's offensive or abusive. Let your no not be timid. You're free to say no when it supports your ongoing evolution. I've been thinking about a few no's for me. You know, after years of struggle and no little introspection, I have finally proclaimed no to kale. Now I know it's good for you. Heaven, I know. And with all apologies to you nutritionists and naturopaths, but I just say no. I say no to kindred spirits. I say no to eating a leathery leaf that takes me 10 minutes to chew. I say no to picking it out of my teeth all day. I have just said kale no. It's interesting. Serendipitously, another no surfaced in my life this past week. And actually, the backstory is that a number of years ago, 15, maybe 18 years ago, I did arrive at a no. And it has served me well. You see, whenever you're in the public eye, you're apt to receive communications and input. But what I decided those many years ago was that I was saying no to anonymous letters. because, I would get them on occasion. And never did they ever serve, really. Never did I feel uplifted or supported. It's kind of like somebody prepares a mess and drops it at your feet and then runs away. I thought, it may be one of the silliest and most cowardice forms of communication. It's irresponsible, no accountability, lacks integrity. There's no opportunity for dialogue, exchange, clarity, growth in the matter. And I decided no. So here's what I did. I developed a strategy. First of all, when an anonymous letter would come, and you can tell them, because they're so sterile. It's just a white envelope and an address and nothing else. And what I agreed to do was to very carefully open it, pull it out so I could just see the very end of the piece of paper. And if there wasn't a name on it, then I would immediately rip it up. And the first time I made good on that no, it felt so awesome. It felt so enlivening. It felt like such a great act of self-care. And I have maintained that, although they've waned. But last week I spoke, and wouldn't you know it, I got an anonymous letter. And I said, Erica, hallelujah, look at what has graced me here. And I did exactly what I told you I would do, saw it was anonymous, didn't give any of it a look, ripped it up and said, hallelujah. Then I did a little prayer blessing for whoever sent it, just blessing them on whatever their path of growth is and blessing what I know to be their heart. And then, with great glee, I filed it under T. Not for teal, but for trash. No. And it feels so good. Now, I'm quite certain that there may be some no's hovering, offering themselves in your life. Maybe a little more significant than kale and the anonymous letters. So what are they for you? Is it that it's time to say no to same old, to complacency, to letting fear pull your strings all the time and limit you? Is there a relationship that needs either to be released or recalibrated? Sometimes you say no to draw a line in the sand, and you say no more of this. No more of this. I invite you to be with that, because that's a part of your liberation, your continual emancipation from limitation. So now let's turn to the yes. Let your yes be yes. Now, I know that in this room filled with so many people, there are an equal number of unique yeses that you're probably poised to empower. It's like, yes, I'm ready for this. Yes, I want to go in this direction. Yes, I'm embracing this. And what I want to do is offer an umbrella over all of those unique yeses of yours to support them. And it is to say yes to the evolution of your very being, to say yes to the evolutionary principle within you, to say yes to how you're created to be a pioneer of the possible, to say yes to letting life continue to have its way in growth for you in all dimensions of that word growth. David Stendhal Rast, brother David Stendhal Rast, wrote, another name for God is surprise. And the God in you and me is constantly ready to surprise us with more about us than we've come to know so far. I tend to know that we form rigid identities of ourselves and others. And we stay stuck in that. And yet the true spirit of us is proclaiming whenever we can listen to its whisper, you're so much more than that. Try your wings. Say yes to that so much more of you. I'm going to have some words of our founder, Ernest Holmes, put on the screen, and take them in. They're so extraordinarily powerful. We start with the proposition that life is for us when we work with it. If we are in harmony with the upper progressive movement of the Spirit, there is nothing that can hinder our advancement. He who understands this will take the position of one who wishes to work in union with the creative power of God. And to such a one will come all the power that he can conceive of and believe in. And I had them underline and make bold that phrase, the upper progressive movement of the Spirit. That's woven into you and me. This urge, this upper progressive urge to be more of what the God seed in us contains. Now, there's a metaphor for this I'd love to share with you. And I invite you to imagine back to the beginnings of creation and that time when it was all together, but then it parted and there was the sky and then there was the water. And in that ocean, which is often called the primordial soup, it was a protoplasm of critical chemicals and elements. And so in a little while, pretty soon, actually eons of time, that protoplasm, that primordial soup, produced a single-celled organism. Now, until that time, there had been no active life. And yet, with that emergence of that single-celled organism, the possibility of every one of us here was activated. Every one of us. That single-celled organism is your earliest ancestor, by the way. Now, this one-celled organism soon became a two-celled, and then a four-celled organism. And it keeps evolving, and pretty soon we had fish and whales and lizards and all that stuff in the water. And more was created and more newness until the waters got really, really full. And then it seemed like evolution turned on itself, turned back on itself, seemingly not producing so much new, but now producing what I would simply call weirdos. Weirdos in the water. Just weird variations, not newness, but weird variations of that great population there. And you might think of that was the end of evolution, but it was actually a part of a larger process. Because one day, a certain weirdo there in the water, a little fish that had grown legs and lungs to go along with fins and gills, that little fish jumped onto land and breathed. At that instant, the possibility of elephants and eagles was activated. Not in manifestation, but in possibility. The possibility was opened up. So incredible. It was a power moment in evolution. Because that strange, weird little fish activated countless other possibilities. Countless other possibilities. Because it was willing to enter into, to give itself over to a greater process, to cooperate with the evolutionary process of transformation. One time in our history, Calvin Coolidge was president, and he decided not to run for a second term. And a reporter asked him, "Why aren't you running for president?" And he said, "Because there's no room for advancement." Because there's something in every one of us that yearns for advancement. When we have the courage to take that radical step forward, transformation can begin. Now, this metaphor speaks also to the evolution of human consciousness. In some respects, as we have grown, we've in a way gone about as far as we can go in limited mentality. I mean, it seems so much that our little mind has turned back on itself because it's filled with like reasons and excuses and lashing out and justifications and harsh judging, blaming, all of that kind of thing. Stuckness, limited stories, filling up the consciousness. But that's also the state, and I'm beginning to sense it going on now, that's also the state where strange variations of creative ideas can also begin to percolate. And I tell you what, that fish is a part of every one of us. It's our capacity to imagine and to crystallize a vision. A vision. Your vision is like a fish with lungs and legs. Okay? An unusual, maybe weird, yet highly progressive opening in life. And when we step forward onto the land of real form, owning that vision, owning it, things may not immediately change, but we have activated immense possibilities that shall emerge through our courage, through our willingness. So the real question is, how will we jump our vision onto dry land? And I know at first it seems radical. It seems like it's going to upset the apple cart of so much going on in our lives, so much that we've tried to cement down for safety and security reasons. And you may feel like a certified weirdo for jumping a vision of change and evolution onto dry land. And I know that some of us are highly qualified in that capacity as certified weirdos. I think our church is fairly full of us in a very loving and powerful way, very much so. But this is the way that we reveal more of the divine magnificence and mystery of our being. So that little fish has more to teach us and some things we can do this week. First of all, the first thing I would entirely encourage us to do is, first of all, exit the soup. Exit the soup. And this means that finally we let our no be no. And we decide no more of this. No more shall I impede myself. No more shall I agree with others who don't have my best interests in mind. No more am I going to hide out from what calls. No more am I going to think that I don't have anything left to give. No more. No more. There's so much more available. But we have to exit the soup of our stories and our excuses, challenge our fears, and go for it anyway. And sometimes it's a progressive process. We showed a picture of Nelson Mandela, such an astounding man. When he was thrown into prison for his leadership in seeking to overthrow apartheid in South Africa, he was understandably discouraged. There he was in prison, sentenced to a life of hard labor, and his initial belief was, quite honestly, it's not happening. It's not happening. But he also wasn't one that was inclined to stay stuck. And he challenged himself, I've got to grow that. I can't stay in that. So he started working with the premise that it could happen. He didn't at first believe it, but he kept working with it. And he kept working with it. And he stayed with that until there came a shift, and he absolutely could embrace and own that it could happen. But he knew this isn't a stopping point. He kept working with that. He decided to embrace that it will happen. And he struggled with that at first, but he kept working with his consciousness, working with a higher perspective of things, a greater vision and understanding of things. And there came a time when he could deeply, powerfully declare, it will happen. But he didn't stop there. He said, there's another step. I want to go to the place where I am knowing and living that it is happening. No matter where I am, no matter the apparent conditions, the process is afoot, and it is happening. And there came a point when he bought into that totally. And it gave him strength and transformed him in that environment. And I believe that his freedom wasn't when they opened those doors 26 years later and let him out, but when he arrived at that realization that it is happening. And of course, he then became president, and his affirmation bore fruit. Exit the soup. What's the soup? You've been swimming around in the muck. It's not you, it's just habits. Get out of there. Then that fish teaches us to breathe in. Breathe in imagination. That fish had to jump onto dry land, take that first step out of the soup, but then it had to take a breath. And I think we get a breath of fresh, expansive air when we imagine. We live in a framework, every one of us. It's our belief system. It's what we believe is possible, who we believe we are. And our choices tend to be limited within the scope of that framework. And that's why sometimes it seems so difficult to make change. What we're called to do is to go beyond that framework through imagination. To imagine outside. Fly in the face of what the limits seem to be and imagine beyond that. Imagine outrageously, creatively, spiritually. And all of a sudden, the realm of your choices and possibilities has expanded. And we can continue to do that. Breathe in possibility, breathe in imagination. What Einstein called holy curiosity. To be curious about what's available to me beyond what I understand. What's available to me if I knew anything's possible? What's available? I wonder. I'm going to imagine. And then we're much more powerful. We're strengthened through imagination. We also showed a picture of Viktor Frankl, and last Sunday I shared how he came in the midst of the horror of a concentration camp experience, how that Austrian psychologist came to the deep and profound realization that there was one thing they could never take away, and that was his freedom to choose his attitudes, no matter what the circumstance. He shares in his writings another very powerful experience in his life at that camp. One wintry day, he was being marched with a group of other prisoners through a field. And it was winter, and it was bitter cold. He had thin clothing on, he had no socks, holes in his shoes, and he was very weak from malnutrition and mistreatment. And at one point, he began to cough so severely it brought him to his knees. And a guard came over and demanded that he get up and keep walking, but he was coughing so hard he couldn't even reply to the guard, and so the guard started beating him with a club and told him he'd die there if he didn't get up. And the thought went through Frankl's mind of, well, this is it for me. But then he says, in that moment, all of a sudden, his imagination leapt out of that snowy field in Poland, and he imagined himself at a lectern sharing with a large, large audience of thousands his lecture on the psychology of death camps. And he was no longer half dead in that field, but he was living in that lecture. And he was telling that imaginary audience about that very moment when he collapsed in the snow and he was too weak to get up. But then he added to it that in that moment he also found a reservoir of strength within him he didn't realize. And he was indeed able finally to stand and walk, though haltingly at first. And he gained more and more strength to go on. And as he was describing this to the audience, at that actual moment back in the snow, he found that he was actually able to stand up and to keep moving. And he kept that visualization going throughout their whole work order there, their whole time of working. And as they also walked the long walk back to the barracks, and as he collapsed into his bunk in exhaustion, he imagined completing that lecture and thousands of people giving him a standing ovation. He made it through. Many years later, 1990, Anaheim, California, he's giving a lecture to 7,000, telling about that story. And at the end, they're on their feet, giving him the very standing ovation he had imagined. You see, what he did was he imagined a future in which his problems were resolved, and then he worked backward to the present to activate the qualities to make that future a reality. That's the power to breathe in imagination. Take a deep breath right now. And let your concept of you expand. Imagine that life is saying to you, oh, there's so much more. You're so much more. You're here, so we're not done with you yet. What could be? Finally, then, that weirdo little fish encourages us all to trust our legs. Trust your legs. Trust that capacity, even when you don't know entirely what's going to happen or where you're going to end up or what's going to transpire, that you have the capacity to take a step. And you can do it flying in the face of whatever's going on, flying in the face of your age, the situations, your past, that you can trust your legs, meaning principles. Those legs on that fish were the principles. The principles we move on are what will carry us forward. The principle that we are pure spirit, that we're born of an infinite loving life, that life supports us if we'll allow it. The principle that according to our believing and our inspired action, it shall be done unto us. That we are creative beings. That we are light beings. On those legs, we can walk forward. I want to close with an actual event in a man's life. It touches me a whole lot. I want to tell you about Jim Henry, who lived in Mystic, Connecticut. I'm going to have to go visit Mystic. Any town that's Mystic, I think that'd probably be pretty good. Jim Henry, 98 years old, and he releases his first and only book in a fisherman's language, it was called. It was a collection of short stories about his life and about his experiences. But what's most remarkable is that Jim Henry didn't learn to read and write until he was 91. You see, he quit school in third grade because his dad had he and his brother go to work to help the family survive. And then after that, he captained a lobster boat and he served in the National Guard. Then he became a skilled carpenter and plumber, even designed and built his own home. But over the years, he hid his illiteracy by employing a number of tricks. Like, for instance, at a restaurant, he'd always order what somebody else ordered, since he couldn't read the menu. And he knew just enough to be able to sign his name. And so he got through. But at 91, he came upon the story of George Dawson, who was a grandson of a slave, who wanted to earn his high school diploma by learning to read and write. And that he accomplished that, George Dawson did, at 98 years old. And Jim Henry said, well, listen, he had the same problem I did, and I figured if he could do it, I could. And so he did. At that age, 91, he learned. He went outside his frame of reference into possibility. And he learned to read and write. He wrote the book, and it caught on like wildfire. A film company bought the rights to make a film about his life. Stories appeared in magazines. He got a letter from the president and from people around the world. And he remarked, here I am, nothing but a fisherman before, and now everyone is looking up to me. It makes me feel so happy. There's a joy in this. Jim Henry passed away at the age of 99, 3 months short of his 100th birthday, with his family reading him passages from Jonathan Livingston Seagull. But you see, he'd already found his wings. He'd found his wings. So, what's this all saying to you, beloved one? I know it's stretching and challenging me. But just remember, we are possibilities always. Always. We're here to explore being free. So exit the soup. Trust your leg. Breathe in imagination. And trust your principles. Trust your legs. That's what it means. That's your destiny and your design. Being free. Let's take this into prayer. How beautiful it is now to become more still and sense deeply within. Yes, within There's something that knows and never forgets. Knows that we are impeccable, magnificent, spiritual life. Here to have life and have it ever more fully and abundantly. Here to reveal through ourselves and our living more and more, eternally more of the infinite Creator, our source. Go to that which knows. That which knows speaks in a quiet heart. It proclaims the voice of Spirit. I have loved you with an everlasting love. I have vested in you qualities of magnificence and the essence of freedom. You, my beloved child, are creative consciousness. Explore beyond what the lesser mind has presumed is so. Explore. Draw upon something deeper. I am here, I am with you, and I will never leave you nor forsake you. And when you trust your legs and step forward, everything that I have is there for you. Just keep stepping. The way is revealed. So in this beautiful, heartfelt moment, may we just give thanks for the life that we are. That life is so much more than our past. So much more than whatever's going on now. That life is glorious. It is energy. It is beauty. It is sacred. Imagine that you're weaving around yourself a cocoon of love. A cocoon that does no longer limit you, but becomes the birthplace of that higher order of being woven into you. And that as you finally say no to self-doubt, no to limited ideas, no to that which no longer belongs to you, say yes to this love. And say yes to the beckoning. Feel it. Feel it that you're emerging from this cocoon, this chrysalis of love. And your splendor is revealed. And you look around and you see other beautiful beings awakening as well. And there's a vibration and an energy that is being cast by these awakened beings and you, and it's filling our world as we rise above limited, toxic levels of thinking and birth the greater possibilities within us. And I speak the word knowing for you and for me, for everyone, wholeness of mind, body, emotions, and circumstance. I affirm for you and me openings into the greater good, and I give thanks in advance that everything we need and require, all the resources, the inspiration, the guidance is already provided, and as we trust our legs and step forward, it is provided. And we go forth in a new way that's exhilarating, somehow knowing. It is for this that I came here. Oh, I give thanks for this as it is anchored deep within us. And as we leave this precious place, this beautiful container of consciousness, it unfolds by means of us. Thank you, Spirit. For indeed, the truth is making us free. For this and more than words can say, I give thanks. We let this be and become, and so it is. And amen.
Thanks for listening to the Mile High Church podcast. This podcast is made possible by the generous contributions from listeners like you. To make a donation, please visit milehighchurch.org.